much for your time.
Thank you. Good input. Yes, next comment.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Joint Committee. I'm Tom Sheehy with Greenberg Toreg, here this morning representing our client Manicube. I'll make just a couple of short remarks, Madam Chair, in the interest of time. I am here this morning speaking in favor of implementation of recommendation number 10, which has been referred to as the freelance license category. And so I'm here speaking in favor of mobile licensing generally. There are businesses that would like to start out here in California to provide cosmetology services, and then they'd like to do that to consumers on demand in their homes and locations outside of brick-and-mortar salons. These appearance-enhancing services, we believe, would give some underserved consumers access to services in a safe and a hygienic manner. And we think that there's room in California to make this type of licensing category available and that it would be beneficial. My client, Manicube, provides 15-minute manicures in offices to women that are, quite frankly, time-strapped and don't always have the time to get their nails done, especially if they're working long hours and their time's limited on the weekend. And so this is an example of a type of mobile business that could help working women like that. To give you a little bit more background, Manicube's mission is to improve the lives of working women. The two female founders started this company in 2012 after seeing many in-office services that were targeted to men, things like shoe shines, barbering, tailoring, and so on. These women were working long hours and they were stretched for time, so they decided to venture out and start their own service targeted more towards women. Today, the company works with human resource managers at companies who were their clients, and they provide 15-minute nail services, mostly in the conference rooms of participating companies. The company is tech-enabled. Their employees book and pay for their appointments on the manicube.com website. Okay. And their customers comment on how this service reintroduces them to manicures that they'd like to have, that they haven't been getting or like to have more of. Okay. Finally, I would just tell you it's worth noting that Manicube services are uber hygienic in that all of their tools and implements are used or disposable and they're never used on more than one customer. The company's highly rigorous hiring and training process is comprised of they hire only employees, they don't use contractors. And we think that there are a lot more jobs that could be created in California, and a lot more of this work could be done because of demands of this not being served. We would just respectfully request that you approve the Board of Cosmetology's sunset extension, and that you please seriously consider creating a new license category, the freelance licensing. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. We appreciate it.
And if I could ask a question, and welcome to the co-chair. A question of the board, in looking through, and I apologize for presenting a bill in another committee, but the issue that I noticed here, and I've seen it in the past, and is the issue of the examination kits that are required for, I guess, estheticians and the hands-on demonstration. In some cases, you would allow for a live model in some instances, but then in others, you require a mannequin and don't allow a live model for someone to bring someone, so they have to rent that mannequin at, I don't remember the cost, $90 maybe or something like that. So what is the rationale behind that?
So the kit contains all the tools that they will need to perform their services, regardless of the mannequin head or not. So the kit's very large.
Okay, the kits are $90 plus an additional $55 for the use of the mannequin.
Correct. We don't. The kit companies are private, so I think the prices probably range. I'm not really sure, but the practical examination does require a candidate to show up with this kit, with all their tools, disinfectant, simulated materials, mannequin head if needed. So the kit is what they must show up with at the practical examination to perform their services and demonstrate their services.
But what is the practical that's used where you can bring a person rather than a mannequin? You allow that in one particular licensing, don't you?
We do. For instance, electrologists must bring a live person. We did away with live people on most of our other examinations because we found a lot of problems with the live person when really we're just looking at the candidate, how they demonstrate the services for safety.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Appreciate the answer.
Another issue we've had has been people failing to show for
their test, because it takes the place of somebody that could take their test and go to work, because we give same-day licensures. You pass your test, you can go to work the next day. Part of the problem with bringing a model is the models don't always show up. So you have the double whammy of a model or the licensee not showing up. And the other problem is that oftentimes models have shown up without identification. And so then you can't use them if you don't know who they are.
And I can see coming without the appropriate, and I noticed in some of the reading that you have to have the particular tools that are necessary for the trade, and that sometimes they may not bring the correct tools, and that could be a problem. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you for that and for the comments. And
do we have another public comment?
Yeah.
Okay, briefly.
My name is Tom and Ike, and I represent the California Association of Regulatory Investigators and Inspectors, the inspectors which also work at Barber and Cosmetology. And we just wanted to make comments in regards to some of the studies that have been done and the classification disparity in pay, as well as training. I know the governor has a executive order that limits the travel to a lot of state employees, and I don't know if there's something that can be done to possibly lift that for barber and cosmetology and let them get some of the training that is offered by Consumer Affairs, where the inspectors aren't able to attend that training. It looks like in the report that a lot of the training that they're talking about they need is actually provided by Consumer Affairs, and which would be very beneficial to those inspectors and would probably help to deal with a lot of the issues that have been raised at this time. So I know that we are trying to work on some bargaining issues to change that, but I don't know if there's anything that the committee could do to maybe persuade some changes in that classification to get a disparity raised and help them with their recruitment and retention problems.
For clarification, are you talking about travel within the state? So inspectors like in Southern California need to come here for training?
Yes. Currently there is a restriction on travel for certain areas. There can be exemptions made for that travel, but DCA offers an enforcement academy, but I know that in some of the boards and bureaus, those inspectors are able to travel. At Barber and Cosmetology, they have not been able to. So we're not sure why that is not happening. And then, in terms of the disparity, there's definitely some recruitment and retention issues there that would help. And as far as the safety of the inspectors goes, it puts a great deal of burden on those inspectors in having to complete their own task because they're somewhat overworked and overloaded in their tasks. So we'd just like to see that addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you.
should I do it? Should we take turns?
Yeah.
Now we'll go to item number 4, if we could, the review of the Board of Accountancy. This is... something new.
The next two done in half an hour. We actually get to have lunch.
We stop at noon?
Well, only if we get
Only if we get this one.
and contractors.
All right, we're going to do. All right, good morning. Or yes, it is still morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning for the review. And please begin.
Right. Good morning, Chairman Hill, Madam Vania, and committee members. I'm Vice President Katrina Salazar, and here with me today is Patty Bowers, our Executive Officer. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to provide the legislature with an update on some of our important consumer protection achievements we've made since our last sunset review. The California Board of Accountancy's role is to regulate the accounting profession in California, and it has been doing so for more than 110 years. We operate under the umbrella of the Department of Consumer Affairs, which provides centralized administrative services to the board, which include legal, personnel, and training. Our primary mandate and highest priority is to protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with professional standards. As accounting practitioners, CPAs provide professional services to a wide variety of consumers, including individuals, companies, organizations, and government agencies. The board licenses and registers CPAs and accounting firms. Presently, we have more than 91,000 CPAs and 5,000 accounting firms. The board is self-funded, draws no monies from the general fund, and is supported by fees drawn from the profession in which it regulates. Our board's budget is presently set at approximately $13 million, and it has approximately 10 months in reserve. The board's 15-member board consists of a public member majority, which offers a valuable consumer voice and perspective to our board discussions. Since our last sunset review, the board has implemented many changes. We have implemented a new retired license status. We've strengthened educational requirements for initial licensure that include a heavy emphasis on ethics study. We've implemented a peer review program. We have a retroactive fingerprinting requirement for those who are licensed prior to that item of fingerprinting as a condition for licensure. And we have also increased staffing in our enforcement program. Some of the board's ongoing successes include maintaining decreased processing timeframes in the licensing program for examination and initial licensure. Today, those are at or below 30 days. For enforcement, our board has adopted the Department of Consumer Affairs performance measures as the benchmark for its enforcement program. The board's enforcement division works closely to close all cases as expeditiously as possible, and I'm proud to report that the program has consistently met 4 of the 5 benchmarks over the past 4 fiscal years, despite experiencing a dramatic increase in our workload. For example, our enforcement program has consistently met the targeted timeframes for processing complaint intake as well as closing investigations at or below the established timeframe of 180 days. Additionally, the enforcement program has consistently met the established timeframes for processing probation cases, including intake and violation response. While the board does not presently meet the performance measure for formal discipline, the investigations that proceed to formal discipline are those that are only the most complex cases. In order for the board to carry out its mission to protect consumers, it is critical that each complaint be fully investigated. Over the past 4 years, we have seen a steady decrease, though, in the processing times associated with these type of matters, and we continue to make improvements by working closely with the Attorney General's office on strategies to reduce delays outside of the board's control, such as the wait time on securing formal hearing date from the Office of Administrative Hearings. With that, we would like to specifically address issues 1, 2, and 4 raised by the committee and are happy to answer questions about any of the other issues identified. Ms. Bowers will now address issues 1 and 2.
Thank you, Vice President Salazar. Good morning, Madam Chair, members, and committee staff. It's my pleasure to be here today. I would like to begin with issue number 1 regarding the board's peer review program. Since 1987, peer review existed on a voluntary level for accounting firms with membership in the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, commonly referred to as AICPA. Peer review is a national standard that almost all accountancy boards now require as a condition of continued licensure. We believe peer review plays an important role in our mission to protect consumers. Accounting firms that undergo peer review are better equipped to deliver high-quality accounting and auditing services to their clients. Undergoing peer review also helps to ensure that licensees are maintaining a currency of knowledge in the accounting and auditing services they provide. At its core, peer review is a study, appraisal, or review of the work of an accounting firm by a licensed certified public accountant who is unaffiliated and independent of the firm being reviewed. Firms that provide accounting and auditing services are required to complete peer review once every 3 years as a condition for license renewal. Presently, the AICPA's peer review program is the only approved program provider in California. Throughout the nation, the AICPA uses various administering entities to administer its program, including the California Society of CPAs. Upon completion of a peer review, a final report is approved by the administering entity and issued to the accounting firm with a rating of pass, pass with deficiencies, or fail. Between 2010 and 2013, over 6,800 California accounting firms completed a peer review. Of those reviewed, 24% received a rating of pass with deficiency or fail, and 8% received a rating of fail. For those firms that received a rating of fail, both the firm and the administering entity were required to submit their peer review report to the board. If an accounting firm receives a pass with deficiency or fail, remedial actions are prescribed by the administering entity. Failure to complete the remedial actions constitutes grounds for termination from the program. There are a wide variety of remedial actions that accounting firms must complete, including completion of specific continuing education, obtaining and updating resource materials, and an expedited peer review. And although a primary focus of the peer review process relates to education, when the legislature enacted the program, a key component was enforcement. When the board receives a notice of a failed peer review, an investigation is opened and the report is reviewed to determine if additional board action is warranted. In support of the educational component of the program, the board monitors the completion of the prescribed remedial action. However, when warranted, disciplinary action against the licensee is also pursued. To date, the board has more than 80 open investigations where it is conducting further review of the firm's practice. A large portion of these investigations will likely result in some type of formal disciplinary action. As part of the original legislation in 2009 that created mandatory peer review, the legislature included a sunset date for the program of January 1, 2014. Also included was a reporting requirement of January 2013. In 2011, the legislature removed the sunset date provision on the program and extended the reporting requirement to January 2015. The nature and scope of the report was also expanded. The board submitted the required report to the legislature in December. To assist in compiling data for the report, the board developed an optional survey. The survey focused on accounting firms required to undergo peer review and covered a wide range of topics, including information specific to the size of the accounting practice, benefits realized from completing peer review, and the costs associated with undergoing peer review. The committee's background material included some statistics drawn from the board's 2015 peer review report. Since submission of the report, the board has identified an error specific to the number of respondents to the optional survey. The total number of respondents was, in fact, 2,850, rather than the 3,737 as originally reported. As for the survey results, 67% of the respondents required to undergo peer review reported that peer review helped to improve their overall services to clients. Additionally, 55% of the respondents reported that they voluntarily made changes that improved services provided to consumers as a result of undergoing peer review. Examples of voluntary changes include staying current on professional standards by taking additional continuing education and revising materials and checklists used in the performance of attest services. The most common change, however, is that they commit to updating their libraries yearly so that they have current reference materials. We believe these results demonstrate that licensees, like the board, recognize the value of peer review and the opportunity it provides to improve the level of services offered to California consumers.
While you're on peer review, if I could ask a question or two in there, I'd appreciate it. I noticed that there are 30 substandard reports out of the 6,800 firms that have been peer reviewed. That seems like a small number. And then I noticed also that firms who, I guess, come in as not substandard, but deficiencies, or maybe rise to a level of substandard, have the opportunity to take corrective action, and then before they get a substandard report. So to obtain a substandard report, you really have to ignore, I guess, the peer review and basically walk away from it or say you're not agreeing with what the outcome of that review was. So my concern is if a person is allowed to correct themselves, then are we getting accurate information as to the quality and the professional standards that those individuals who are peer-reviewed have?
So, Senator, if the individual corrected the deficiencies based on the prescribed conditions that were set out in the peer review process, the failed peer review report would still come to the board for review. And though we would look at and certainly consider the prescribed remedial actions that were ordered, should the board feel there's action appropriate to take, we would still pursue appropriate action against the license.
So the failed number that you're showing is the 24% number?
The 24% would be the pass with deficiencies noted, and those individuals would have been prescribed remedial action that we would monitor to ensure completion. The 8% are the failed peer review reports, and those failed would come to the board both by the licensee and the administering entity for investigation.
I see. And I guess the 24% with deficiencies, I don't know, for some reason that seems like a high number, especially from a professional or a profession that should be fairly accurate in the work that they perform and do. So I'm just thinking, if I were the person on the receiving end of those services, I don't know if 24% is a good number to have. So what and how do you feel related to that?
Absolutely, Senator. I would agree with that assessment, and that, I think, speaks to the benefit of the peer review program being mandatory in California. Prior to becoming mandatory, firms could voluntarily participate in that process, and many did. And when California made it a mandatory program, firms who were not previously under peer review now had to join that process and have additional oversight and scrutiny of the services they provide. And so these statistics are drawn from the implementation of peer review, firms that were not previously peer reviewed going through the process for the first time. And I would certainly hope and expect to see, as firms continue to participate in peer review, that those failed or passed with deficiencies would significantly decrease.
But since your peer review isn't, as comprehensive in terms of the numbers that you peer review on a regular basis, does this put into question your continuing education programs at all, or the fact that the fact that we do have that high deficiency rate? Yes, pass with deficiencies. Does that? I mean, I'm just wondering if that's the number that you find from the peer review, then you could extrapolate that and assume that it's in the total number of the profession, we have that same rate. That seems like a large number, and therefore there may be some deficiency in how the profession is continuing to educate itself. So just something, if you could look at, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Very good. Please continue.
Thank you. Moving on to issue number 2, which was raised during our last sunset review and relates to disciplinary case management. As Vice President Salazar mentioned, we are presently meeting 4 of our 5 performance measures, which are intake through investigation, probation intake, and probation violation response. The only performance measure the board is not presently meeting is associated with formal discipline. Since our last sunset review hearing, the board has taken several steps to address this performance measure. I would like to highlight just a couple. As part of its recent strategic plan, the board adopted an objective targeted at reducing enforcement timeframes and working with the Attorney General's office to reduce timeframes and improve the overall process. The board has worked to achieve this objective by streamlining its investigative report to allow for easy use by the AG's office in drafting pleadings, providing the AG's office with settlement terms at the time a pleading is served, getting matters calendared once settlement no longer appears to be a viable option, and working with the Attorney General's office to prepare default decisions immediately if a notice of defense is not filed. In addition to working with the AG's office, the board looked internally to identify areas for improvement. Some examples include expanding the role of analysts in the areas of investigation, allowing the board's technical resources, its investigative CPAs, to concentrate on those matters where the expertise and knowledge of licensure is most needed. Additionally, the board now requires all new investigators to undergo increased training through a nationally recognized training program, and this is in addition to their attendance at the department's Enforcement Academy. The board has also streamlined its complaint intake process to triage cases earlier. Lastly, the board received additional staffing resources as part of its 2013 budget, 17 in total for the enforcement program. All of these positions have been filled and training is nearing completion. These positions will further aid the board in reaching the 540-day target for formal discipline. And while the board does not presently meet the target, it has seen a decrease in the overall performance metrics over the past 4 fiscal years. In fiscal year 2010-11, the average time frame for formal discipline was 924 days. In 2013-14 fiscal year, this number is down to 813 days, representing a 12% decrease. This decrease has occurred in spite the fact that the board has experienced a significant increase in the total number of complaints, from 854 in fiscal year 2010-11 to 3,255 in fiscal year 2013-14. The board will continue to make a concerted effort to meet its performance measure and will continue to work closely with the Attorney General's office and the Office of Administrative Hearing to reduce timeframes for prosecuting and hearing cases. I would now like to turn it back to Vice President Salazar to address issue number 4.
Thank you. Issue 4 concerns the board's reserve funds and the need to ensure that it is equal to or just slightly less than the 24 months of estimated expenditures. The board's reserves was an issue during its previous sunset review. The concern at that time was that the reserve level was significantly higher than the 9-month statutory requirement. The direction was provided by the legislature to reduce fees to bring the reserve down to this 9-month level. Subsequently, in 2011, the board's 9-month reserve requirement was eliminated via Senate Bill 80. Since the prior sunset review, the Board of Accountancy has implemented 2 fee reductions. The first fee reduction in July 2012 equaled an approximate 40% reduction in fees. The second fee adjustment, which started in July 2014, was much more significant and equaled an approximate 75% reduction in fees from what existed in 2011. As of January 1st, the board's reserve level stands at 9.5 months. However, this is projected to decrease as we are still under a fee reduction. The board does not anticipate any future fee reductions, but rather will be discussing at the board meeting tomorrow an adjustment to its fees to increase the reserve. The board believes it can reach and maintain a reserve level of 24 months through a combination of increased fees and repayment of outstanding loans to the general fund, which would be an adequate level to manage the most complex enforcement matters. Based on the most recent loan obligation report issued by the Department of Finance, we are scheduled to receive approximately $17 million in the next 3 fiscal years. This leaves an outstanding balance of $14 million that does not have a projected repayment date. Accelerating the repayment of this $14 million would achieve a healthy reserve level. Because of the importance to the mission of consumer protection, the board continues to reserve on an ongoing basis the reserve balances and the month's expenditures available for operations. Lastly, and in closing, issue number 6 relates to the board itself and its sunset date. The board has significantly increased consumer protection since its last sunset review. Specifically, we've added additional staff, as mentioned, to our enforcement program to address increased caseload and made it stronger than ever. We've implemented the peer review program, which has been very active and made great strides in significantly enhancing consumer protection and helping educate licensees. We've strengthened educational requirements for initial licensure and included a heavy emphasis on ethics study. And lastly, we've implemented a fingerprinting requirement for licensees that were not required to undergo this process as a condition of their initial licensure. We believe that the State Board of Accountancy is achieving its mission and statutory obligation to protect consumers through its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. For these reasons, the Board respectfully requests that the California Board of Accountancy be given a 4-year extension on its sunset date. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with the committee about the Board's progress in meeting its mandate to protect consumers. We would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Salazar. Appreciate the good report. Questions at all? No, and you've answered them, I think. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now we'll have an opportunity for professional groups or organizations or individuals for public comment. You can stay. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Madam Chair just left, so I'll make sure I don't make that mistake.
Right back.
I'm Bruce Allen with the California Society of Certified Public Accountants. We've read the report, and for the years past, we've worked with the board through the sunset review process. We're very pleased with the quality of work we believe that the board does on behalf of the public and the profession, and we would also urge that the legislature extend the board sunset for another 4 years. We will make ourselves available to the legislature and to the board to assist in addressing any of the issues that have been raised in the report or that comes up in the future. Thank you very much, and
appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Allen. That's very kind. Wonderful. Thank you. Since I see no further questions, appreciate it. Ms. Salazar, thank you. Ms. Bowers, thank you very much. Appreciate you. We're going to take a 30-minute recess right now, if that's all right, but only 30 minutes, and then so we'll be back at 12:25 and continue on through the 3 o'clock setting, and we should be finished, I'm sure, by then. So 1/2 hour from now, 12:25, we'll resume after the recess. Thank you.